I have never forgotten that morning. The sky over Los Angeles was a dull gray, the sunlight swallowed by an unusual cold mist that felt alien in this sun-drenched city. I was walking along a deserted street in Lemert Park, a place neither glamorous nor desolate. White fences, peeling and chipped, empty lots where wild grass tangled, everything cloaked in an eerie shade of gloom. I remember the faint whistle of the wind, sending a chill down my spine even though the air itself wasn't cold. And then I saw it. At first I thought it was some strange statue discarded in the field. A pale shape, ghostly white, like broken porcelain, lying still against the dark grass. I slowed my pace, my heart pounding heavier with each step. As I drew closer, my eyes widened until they ached. No, it wasn't a statue. It was the body of a woman, cut clean in two. The upper half lay neatly in the grass, face turned to the sky. But it was no longer the face of the living. Red lips stretched into a grotesque carved smile, cruel and deliberate. The lower half of the body rested several feet away, completely severed, flesh drained of all warmth and color. I froze, every detail etched into memory. No pools of blood around her, as if someone had washed the body before displaying it. The cuts were sharp, surgical, executed with chilling precision. It didn't look like murder, it looked like ritual, a message. A game played by someone savoring their own cruelty. Her name would later haunt all of America, Elizabeth Short, the young woman the world would come to know as the Black Dahlia. But wait, let's step back. To grasp the horror of that scene, you must first know who Elizabeth Short was and what fate led her here. But before her life story, let me return to that moment, the moment when nightmare took root, when the woman who discovered the body called police. The sound of sirens shattered the heavy silence. Neighbors began to gather, whispers, horrified glances, and a morbid curiosity that hovered in the air. Even the seasoned officers arriving on scene couldn't hide their shock. Murder in Los Angeles was nothing new, but a body cut in half displayed like some macabre exhibit, unprecedented. The area was quickly cordoned off, cameras flashed without pause. Reporters descended like vultures, jostling, shoving, their bulbs exploding like lightning in a storm of depravity. And in the middle of it all, an anonymous young woman became the centerpiece of a nightmare that would never end. Forensic investigators worked quickly. There was no blood. The body had been drained entirely. The incisions were so precise that the coroner later remarked, "This was not the work of an amateur." Elizabeth's face had been re-sculpted, the corners of her mouth slashed upward toward her ears, twisting her lips into a ghastly grin. Was it a message, a vengeance, or just the sick amusement of a sadist? As detectives dug into her past, they uncovered Elizabeth Short, 22 years old, beautiful, restless, and hungry for stardom. She had earned the nickname Black Dahlia for her jet-black hair and striking fashion, often dressed in black, like a dark flower blooming in the glittering city. Yet beneath that allure was a life of turbulence, fleeting romances, and mysteries no one had ever unraveled. That morning, Los Angeles seemed to stop breathing. Newspapers blared the headline, "The Black Dahlia Murder." And thus began one of the most infamous crimes in American history. But do you think you know the whole story? You don't. Elizabeth's death was only the surface, the visible tip of an iceberg steeped in blood and shadows. The deeper you go, the more you'll realize this city was never as clean as it pretended to be. If the morning of January 15, 1947 was the moment that sealed Elizabeth Short's name in infamy. Then the years before were a far sadder, darker painting than most imagined. I spent hours in a weathered cafe in downtown Los Angeles, poring over yellowed files and faded black and white photographs. The young woman staring out of those images did not look like someone destined to become the victim of a grotesque murder. There was a dreaminess about her, a distance, as if she were searching for something beyond this world. Elizabeth Short, gray-blue eyes deep and searching, porcelain skin, sleek dark hair. A beauty impossible to forget, yet fragile, brittle, as if it might shatter at a touch. Born in Boston, Massachusetts, she was the third of 5 daughters. The family lived modestly until her father walked out. William Short abandoned his wife and children during the Great Depression, leaving behind a wound and a resentment Elizabeth would never fully escape. Those who knew her said she was outgoing yet lonely, a girl hungry to break free of the ordinary. In her teens, Elizabeth battled health problems. Chronic respiratory illness forced her into hospitals, sometimes for weeks at a time. Perhaps those long confinements sparked her great dream, to leave behind a life of quiet anonymity and step into the light of fame. At 16, she left home for Florida, and in the years that followed, drifted from state to state. Everywhere she went, she left impressions. A striking girl, stylish, magnetic, but always somehow like an actress still waiting for her role. People remembered the parties, the bars, the men who drifted through her life, pilots, musicians, sailors. No connections. She had only her looks and her audacity. She was often seen in nightclubs and cocktail lounges, sometimes on the arm of wealthy men, sometimes alone, her eyes scanning the room for something or someone. Rumors said she favored all black outfits, a black flower in her hair, earning her the nickname the Black Dahlia from Friends, a dark echo of the film noir The Blue Dahlia. The name stuck like a prophecy she could not escape. Her life, though, was not just cocktails and ambition. She worked as a waitress, a shop girl. She often relied on friends for a bed, lived out of cheap hotels. She was even arrested once for underage drinking. Letters home to her mother painted pictures of hope, plans, opportunities. Yet between the lines, a shadow lingered. "Don't worry, Mama, I'll be famous someday," she wrote. But she never guessed how fame would claim her. There was love, too. She was engaged to a pilot, Matt Gordon, who died in a plane crash in India in 1945. His death left a scar that never healed. Friends said she grew reckless afterward, as if trying to outrun grief. In her final months, Elizabeth drifted like a leaf in a vast city. No steady home, no steady work. She slept on couches, in cheap hotels, sometimes vanishing for days. Rumors swirled that she kept company with dangerous men, even those tied to crime. Nothing could ever be confirmed. Then came the night of January 9th, 1947. Elizabeth was last seen wearing all black, a fur coat draped over her shoulders, makeup carefully applied. A witness claimed she was in a downtown bar with a man. Some said he was a new lover, wealthy and powerful. Others insisted he was dangerous. After that night, Elizabeth disappeared. No phone calls, no trace. 1 week later, her severed body was found in a vacant lot, forever etching her into Los Angeles's blood-soaked history. There was something uncanny about the way Elizabeth lived, free yet fragile, always teetering on the edge of darkness. Perhaps that was what drew her into the orbit of her killer. Sometimes I wonder, did she sense death closing in? Walking alone through city nights, strangers' eyes following her, promises glittering and empty. Maybe she knew. Maybe she thought she still had time. But fate gave her no second chance. Los Angeles, early January 1947. The city throbbed like a giant beast, alive at night with neon lights stretching down its boulevards, with laughter and jazz spilling out of crowded bars. But beneath the glow, darkness always lingered, and it was that darkness that swallowed Elizabeth short. I sifted through witness statements, brittle police reports, yellowed newspaper clippings. That night, Elizabeth seemed to be chasing one last hope, or perhaps running from something she couldn't escape. On January 9th, 1947, she was driven back to Los Angeles by Robert Red Manley, spent a night in a cheap motel. And the next morning, Red dropped her at the Grand Biltmore Hotel downtown. Elizabeth had told him she was meeting a friend there. Hotel staff recalled seeing her in the lobby, black fur coat, dark skirt, hair neatly styled. Her eyes were bright, but restless. Who was she waiting for? No one knew. From there, her trail dissolved like mist. Reports later suggested she was spotted in a nearby bar, talking to a man. He was described as tall, polite, dressed in dark clothing. Some whispered he was a soldier, others a doctor. But no one seemed to remember his face, or perhaps they didn't want to. Then, Elizabeth vanished. I try to picture the moment. A young, fragile woman in a vast city, stepping into a stranger's car, or turning down an unlit street. Los Angeles nights were beautiful, but dangerous. Street lamps glowed only a few feet ahead. Beyond them stretched endless shadows. If you listened closely, you might hear footsteps echoing on cold pavement, the hum of cars fading into the distance. And then, silence. Only a pair of eyes watching. How did he approach her? A courteous invitation? A handshake? Or perhaps the open door of a car, its interior light spilling out like a sweet, deadly trap. We will never know. But one thing is certain. Elizabeth left with him. And after that night, she was never seen alive again. Investigators later concluded that she had been held captive for several days. Her body bore signs of torture, though not of frenzy, but of intent. Cuts precise, deliberate, executed with chilling detachment. Some theories claimed she had been taken to a secret house, where her killer had the time to enact his perverse ritual. Others believed he meant to craft a work of art, for her body had been washed, drained of blood, and arranged carefully, like a grotesque message to the city itself. Imagine it, Elizabeth locked inside a cold room with white walls, a harsh bulb glaring overhead. The sound of the door locking behind her, final, irrevocable. The killer watching silently, like a cat toying with its prey. Elizabeth, who once dreamed of becoming an actress, was reduced to a character in the murderer's play. Reading this sends chills down my spine. Some details can never be confirmed, yet they whisper through the old records. A muffled scream, a phone call never made, a car gliding down the night unnoticed. For days, no one knew where Elizabeth had gone. In Massachusetts, her mother waited for word. Friends assumed she was simply off with someone new. In truth, she imagined each detail as I read, and they cut into my mind like knives. On the morning of January 15, 1947, when a woman out walking with her child noticed something pale on a vacant lot, she thought it was a discarded mannequin. But as she drew closer, she froze. A body severed in two, lay there. The upper torso was set 1/2 meter from the lower half. No blood, no dirt. Everything was unnervingly clean, as though someone had taken time to scrub and display it. The police arrived immediately. I read the notes of the first officer at the scene. Female body, early 20s, white skin, dark hair, severed cleanly at the waist, blood completely drained. Signs the body was washed before being placed here. But what horrified everyone most was the face. The corners of her mouth had been slashed wide, almost to the ears, transforming her smile into a grotesque wound. Her eyes were open, staring at the grey sky, asking a question that would never be answered. The autopsy was conducted by Dr. Frederick Newbar. He concluded the body had been bisected with a surgical technique known as hemicorporectomy, something usually performed only in operating rooms. The precision of the cuts was extraordinary, as if the blade never faltered. This led to the first major theory. The killer had medical training or at least surgical experience. There were other grim details: ligature marks on the wrists and ankles, deep bruises and small incisions that suggested deliberate manipulation. This was not just a murder, it was a staging. I spent hours staring at the crime scene photograph, images not for the faint of heart. An empty lot, a white fence, houses in the distance, and at the center, a divided body, silent as a secret. People later said the scene looked like a macabre artwork. And that was what terrified the police most. This was not a crime of passion, but a performance. The investigation began. News spread instantly. Within hours, major newspapers had splashed it across their front pages. Crowds poured into Leimert Park, eager to glimpse the place where death had struck. Police quickly sealed off the site, but rumors multiplied. Detectives scoured for evidence. Tire tracks? None. Footprints? None. The ground was too clean. It was suspected the killer had transported the body by car and deposited it under cover of night. Yet no one had seen a thing. Then came the first letter. On January 23, 1947, the Los Angeles Examiner path, but every lead collapsed into nothing. One figure loomed large: Dr. George Hodel, a well-known physician with a decadent reputation. Years later, records revealed his home had been wiretapped, and on one chilling tape, he was heard saying, "Suppose I did kill the Black Dahlia. They can't prove it. They can't." But no hard evidence ever surfaced. Theories multiplied. Some claimed Elizabeth was the victim of a sadistic doctor, others of a serial killer, or even a group of conspirators. Some argued the bisection was for easier transport. Others believed it was ritual. The most frightening truth was this: the case was never solved. Despite the police tearing Los Angeles apart, despite journalists hounding every lead, despite hundreds of theories, the murderer disappeared into history. The Black Dahlia case remains one of America's darkest unsolved mysteries. And when I close the file, a cold thought lingers. The killer may be dead. He may be old, or he may still walk among the crowd. And the name Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short, endures as a ghost haunting Los Angeles. A reminder that some secrets are never revealed. Decades have passed since that cold morning in Leimert Park. Yet the name Black Dahlia still echoes like a curse in Los Angeles's memory. I have read hundreds of pages of reports, listened to dozens of accounts, but the final answer, who killed Elizabeth Short, remains in the shadows. And it is that silence that has turned the story into a chilling legend. The case closed, but the haunting began. They say Elizabeth Short became a symbol of fragile beauty crushed by darkness. She was the image of a Hollywood dream gone wrong, a young woman seeking fame, ending instead in a grotesque tragedy. The newspapers did more than report. They exploited every detail, from her most glamorous photos to the most sordid rumors. At times, it seemed the city forgot she was a person, a daughter, a lover, and turned her into a spectacle. But that, perhaps, is why the case endures. Theories multiplied. Amateur sleuths, writers, reporters, even relatives of suspects put forth their views. Some believe the killer was George Hodel, the enigmatic doctor with his arrogant words and medical expertise. His son, Steve Hodel, a former detective, later wrote books claiming his father was the murderer. Others pointed to surgeons or physicians who possessed the necessary skills. Some researchers suggested Elizabeth was the victim of a group, or even of a ritual killing. One theory argued the bisection was films, crime novels, and galleries invoked her image.
From a horrific crime, she became a part of popular culture, a dark emblem of the American dream's underbelly. Hollywood thrives on tragedy, and Elizabeth Short became the reluctant muse of horror and crime. Yet, in doing so, the truth blurred. Behind it all was a real woman who died in pain, her mystery unsolved.
Could the truth have been buried? The police files contain gaps. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses passed away. Friends, acquaintances, lovers faded with time. Some detectives believed the case was obstructed by corruption, by media pressure, by forces that wanted it forgotten. Others were more hopeful. We may never know his name, but he left his mark, a mark of cruelty so deep it cannot be forgotten. Los Angeles tonight still burns bright, but on certain old streets, they say, the spirit of the Black Dahlia lingers. Some claim to glimpse a young woman in a black dress, dark hair flowing, passing by mirrors before vanishing. Perhaps it is only the city's imagination, or perhaps its way of keeping alive the memory of a victim denied justice. At times, when I think of Elizabeth, I don't only see the stark white crime scene. I remember the 22-year-old who left home with shining eyes, dreaming of studio lights. I remember the letters she wrote to her mother, promising she would be famous, that things would be all right. And in the end, she did become famous, but not in any way she or anyone could have wished. The Black Dahlia is not just a case. It is a cautionary tale. It reminds us that dreams sometimes come at too high a price, and in the shadows of glittering streets, predators lurk unseen.
Even now, when you mention the Black Dahlia, no one asks, who? Everyone knows, the girl cut in two, transformed into a symbol of horror. But one question still hangs in the air, cold and sharp as a blade. Who killed Elizabeth Short?